Seven Taoist Masters, Chu Chang Chun's Enlightenment in the Acceptance of the Seven Taoist Masters by the Jade Empress as Immortals. So, Chu Chang Chun, one of Master Wang's disciples. We had actually spoken about Chu Chang Chun in an earlier reading when Matang Yang had left his mansion and had found him tending to his master Wang's grave, and they both of them had traveled, and they forget one of them, Matang Yang, forgot his meditation cushion, and they had only one cushion, and they were at a shrine. They were at an abandoned shrine, and Matang Yang got angry at Chu Chang Chun because he was thinking too much about their sustenance, their food, and Matang Yang was tired of that, and he left. He traveled underground and then found enlightenment in the Cow Mountains. But Chu Chang Chun had been told by his Master Wang, that he was going to have to experience a lot more hardships than the rest of the initiates. And so Chu Chang Chun knew after Matang Yang left him that he would be the only one of the seven disciples of Wang Chung Yang that was going to be left, and he could no longer rely on the help of others. All of them, he thought, probably they have already reached enlightenment, and I'm the only one still left. And so he, in order to, after inspired by Matang Yang's words, he composed this poem: "Let my mind forget about eating and drinking. If I think of comfort and riches, let my bones and tendons wither. If I think of food and water, let my mouth be plagued with boils. Let my body be empty, an empty vessel where nothing can be stored." And so he also he came across, in his travels, he started traveling, he came across a fortune teller, a diviner, that told him that his destiny was to die of hunger. And so he struggled a lot with these issues of food and sustenance, and this was an obstruction for him during his path. And he eventually reached a river where he saw the need for, because he didn't know how to cross the river, and he saw that a lot of elderly people and foreign people were not knowing where the river was you were able to wade through it because it was shallow in certain areas, but only the local people knew. And so he found that he could do service, he could do seva by carrying people across, and he built a small shack there in the river, and he probably doesn't say, but he probably built like a canoe or something, like some kind of boat, and he crossed people across the river. And so for 6 years, Chu Chang Chin was doing this, and whether there was wind or rain or storm, he was very much good at this and unstoppable. His fame spread, and many people came to regard him as an immortal. And then one day, as he was meditating, his spirit was freed and journeyed long distances before returning. And then he understood that his master's words, that his hardships were not going to end until he reached a river, um, that well, a stony river. This was a very stony river, and um, and so and so there was this occasion where he was carrying three captains across, and they had killed a bandit that was causing a lot of trouble in a nearby village, and this was by imperial orders that and so they were carrying the head of this bandit. But during this crossing of the river, it was very stormy, and two of the captains died, and only one of them was left. But the head of the bandit was lost in the river, and Chiu Chang Chun was very much aware that he would be punished very harshly by not having the head of this bandit, by not being able to present it. And so he himself offered that he could take his head, and such was um, his fearlessness of death, because he was already um, going to different regions and considering his body as something not as important probably, and he just saw this need, and he offered his physical body, really. And so this happened, and Chiu Chang Chun was called um, uh, by some lords of the heavens, and his astral or a lighter aspect of his consciousness, whether astral or whatever body, went uh, into heaven, because these lords were calling him. And so the lords of the three seasons, the keepers of the heavenly, earth, and water realms, called him, and they said, your personal sacrifice has moved the lords of heaven. They will replace your mortal body with an immortal body, and your mortal spirit will with an immortal spirit. In 7 years you will ascend to the palace of the Empress of Heaven. And Chu Chang Chun took a step and found that he was immediately transported to the palace of the heavenly lords. He bowed to the lords of the three seasons and returned the sword uh, to them, because they said that, do not kill yourself, give the sword back to us. It is not your destiny to do this, but it is not your destiny to do this, and the captain, will be fine. And so um, Chiu Chang Chun was endowed by this immortal body and so on. But he was curious, because now that he had attained the immortal body, now he was curious about what the fortune teller earlier had told him, that he was destined to die of hunger. And so how could this happen? And he returned to the fortune teller and said, "Sir, you were wrong in your divination. I not only did not die, but have attained enlightenment." And the fortune teller laughed and said, "Taoist master, I was not mistaken, and back then, a few years ago, your face had the characteristics that mark you as a man who would die of hunger, but now those features are gone from your face. As a matter of fact, your face now tells me that you are destined to become an immortal, and that you will be given a large monastery by the emperor, and your disciples will carry your teachings to the ends of the world." And now Chiu Chang Chun, now he understood what an herb gatherer he had encountered earlier had told him about. That it's really the heart that determines the facial features, and that if the heart changes, then the facial characteristics will change. And so even perhaps destiny here and the karma and everything. And Ishwar Puriji Maharaj explained to us how even masters are able to change our destiny at higher levels, but that the ultimate destiny is set uh, at a very high level. But however, that there are changes possible to be made, and the master can help us to change our destiny by his grace. And so Chu Chang Chun left the fortune teller and took shelter at night in an abandoned shrine. And while he was meditating, a strong gust of wind blew in from the window, and a shroud of fog enveloped him, because he had harbored actually he had harbored a trace of malicious intent toward the fortune teller. The monsters of the mind returned to plague him. A ferocious tiger appeared in front of Chu Chang Chun and snarled. Remembering Wan Chung Yang's teachings, he continued meditating as if nothing had happened. The tiger disappeared, and a young Taoist apprentice stood at the door of the shrine saying, "My master, Ma Tang Yang, is on his way here. Won't you get up and meet him outside?" The boy disappeared, and Chu Chang Chun saw the familiar figure of Ma Tang Yang walking along a mountain trail. Chu Chang Chun said aloud, "In the Tao there are no attachments. If he comes, then let him come. If he leaves, then let him leave." The image of Matang Yang disappeared, and in his place was a large crowd of people, men and women, young and old. They said to him, "Taoist master, you carried us across the river through sun and rain. We have gathered together 1 bushel of rice and a sack of gold. Come get your reward, and you will have enough to see you through this lifetime." And Chu Chang Chun again ignored them and continued meditating. The image of the crowd dissolved, and a young girl stood in front of him. She was dressed in rags, and her arms and legs were covered with bruises. "Kind sir, please escort me to my uncle's home. My stepmother has beaten me and turned me out of the house. If you help me, my uncle shall reward you well." Chiu Chang Chun acted as if nothing had happened. The image of the girl disappeared, and his sister-in-law appeared, saying, "Your elder brother died of an unknown illness, and your uncle has taken over your father's property. He has given us 3 days' notice to leave. My children and I have nowhere to go. Come back quickly and put things right." At the same time, Chiu Chang Chun's nephews and nieces appeared, tugging at his sleeves, saying, "Uncle, please come home. Our father is dead. We will all be beggars if you won't help us." Chiu Chang Chun continued meditating. The images of the children and his sister-in-law disappeared. Soon after that, the fog lifted. Only the occasional rustle of dry leaves could be heard in the stillness of the night. Chiu Chang Chun suddenly heard a crack of thunder. He looked up to the sky and saw the gates of heaven open. 2 children appeared, mounted on the back of a stork. The stork flew to where Chung Chang Chun was sitting, and the children invited him to ascend to the gates of heaven with them. And because then Chun realized, he said to himself, because I harbored an intention to challenge the fortune teller, my mind is being constantly attacked by illusions. If I do not find a way to dissolve these monsters, the yin energies will remain in my body, and I shall never attain a body of purity. Chun thought for a long time and finally came upon a plan. He found a small hill and built a grass hut at the bottom of the slope. Next to the hut, he placed a large boulder. Whenever false visions appeared, he would push the boulder up the hill and roll it down the slope. Then he would return to his hut to meditate. And for 3 years, Chun meditated and pushed the boulder up the hill when his mind was invaded by illusions. Finally, he dissolved the last trace of ego from his mind. And then Chun, he again was called by his intuition to go other places and to travel and to help people along the way. And there was in the northern plains, it was farmlands, and the emperor there made offerings to the lords of heaven because it had not rained. There was a drought, and so the emperor made these offerings, and he summoned his ministers to look for holy people and saints and people who were famous for doing miracles and bringing rain. And so they were summoning people, and they found Chun had successfully prayed for rain before, and they sought him out. And Chun after meeting with the emperor, he bowed to him and replied, "Yes, sir, sire, you are indeed a great ruler, for you place the welfare of your people above everything else. Let us not delay matters. Tomorrow I shall pray for rain. I shall need a platform on which an altar should be placed. I shall petition the Jade Emperor, and within 3 days the rains will come." So the next day, Chun and the emperor ascended the altar. The emperor offered incense, returned to his seat under the canopy, and waited. Chun prostrated himself before the altar, uttered incantations, and prayed for 3 days under the hot sun. On the third day, at noon, a small black cloud appeared, and the cloud grew in size until it covered the sky. And finally, it began to rain, and the crops were saved for all the farmers. And the emperor was so impressed with Chun's powers that he made the Taoist monk his religious advisor. Chun was given a residence within the imperial palace, and often the emperor would seek out his company for advice on matters of spiritual training. And even the emperor, he said, "Well, I wish I could retire from the matters of government so that I could study the teachings of the Tao. But I am afraid this is wishful thinking. I have no son. There is no heir to whom I can pass my responsibilities." Chun smiled and said, "Sire, if I am not mistaken, I think the empress is pregnant." And so the emperor was very excited and happy and jumping, and when the emperor told this to the empress, she said, "The destiny of your empire lies in the birth of our child. Maybe we ought to consult another source as well, just to be sure. that the Taoist master's predictions are well founded. I know of a Buddhist monk who possesses great powers of divination. He is a Zen master. His name is Pai Yun. He is the abbot of the White Cloud Monastery. So the emperor nodded in agreement and said, "Then let us summon Pai Yun and see what he has to say." Next day, Pai Yun appeared before the emperor, and the emperor said to the Buddhist monks, "Zen master, tell me, will the empress give birth to a boy or a girl?" Zen master Pai Yun replied, "According to my divination, the empress will give birth to a girl." The emperor did not like what he heard. He looked at Pai Yun and said, "Master, are you sure? Yesterday the Taoist master Chiu Chang Chen told me that I shall have an heir." And Pai Yun said, "Sir, I am absolutely sure." And what can you say? And he said, "I think this time, Chiu Chang Chun, you are in error. My divination never fails." And so um, Chu Chang Chun replied, "Well, it might be that the empress originally conceived a female child, but because the emperor prayed for rain to save his people from famine, the lords of heaven may reward his majesty for his virtuous deeds and change the female fetus to a male." Pai Yun said, "I have never heard of such ridiculous things, but if you are so confident that the emperor will have a male child, then let us each place a bet. If the empress gives birth to a boy, I shall give you White Cloud Monastery. But if it is a girl, then what will you do?" Without hesitation, Chiu Chang Chun said, "I shall present you with my head." And the wager was written out and signed in the presence of the emperor. And so what Chiu Chang Chun did, when he returned to his quarters, he prepared a talisman and sent it to the palace of the Empress of Heaven. The talisman summoned a powerful fairy who was capable of changing the shapes and forms. On the night when the Empress was about to give birth, the fairy appeared before Chu Chang Chun and said, "Master, you have summoned me to help. What do you want me to do?" Chu Chang Chun said, "Go to the chamber of the Empress. When the baby is born, I want you to open your gourd, capture the spirit of the female baby, and replace it with a male." The fairy bowed and said, "Master, it shall be done." And so it was done. And when the Empress was finally giving birth, it came out that it was a girl, and the child was brought to the emperor, and they examined her. They examined, and yeah, it was a girl. And so Pai Yun was saying, "Okay, I won. I will not give the White Cloud Monastery. I won, but I want Chu Chang Chun's head." And the emperor was not eager to do this because he didn't want to shed blood, and then he had just had a child, and he said, "No, I don't want to do this." But Pai Yun was insistent. But then Chu Chang Chun just smiled to this and said, "Well, why don't you examine again the baby?" And on examining in front of Zen Master Pai Yun and in front of everyone, they examined the baby again, and then the emperor was saying, "I have a son!" And Pai Yun could not conceal his puzzlement and agitation. He could not believe it, and he examined the baby over and over again. Could not understand how he could have made a mistake in his divination. And so the emperor told Pai Yun, "You shall prepare to sign the papers that will transfer the ownership of White Cloud Monastery to Chiu Chang Chun." And so it was. And so, and Pai Yun and the empress did not like what had happened about the monastery, and Pai Yun was trying to convince the empress that Chiu Chang Chun was actually not a master at all, and he was fake, and that he was not an immortal. And he said to the empress, "We should test Chiu Chang Chun, that he is really immortal, because he is advising the emperor on all duties of the lands and the people, and he will lead him astray. And if he is not truly an immortal, he is listening to him as if he was an immortal, taking his word so strongly as if he was an immortal. And this could lead the empire to ruin. And in that way, he convinced the empress to test if Chu Chang Chun was really an immortal. And in this way, he suggested you should make some cups of wine, but they will actually be poison. And so an imperial emissary arrived at White Cloud Monastery to present the empress's invitation to Chu Chang Chun. And Chu Chang Chun already knew of all of the intentions of the empress, so he accepted the invitation and then instructed his disciples to fill 24 tubs with cold water. And he said, "Make sure you have them ready. I shall need them when I return. My life and death depends on them." Chu Chang Chun then went to the imperial palace. And the empress, once he arrived, the empress said, "Taoist master, your powers of divination are indeed impressive. You predicted that I would give birth to a boy, and the country now has a crown prince. Let me express my gratitude and admiration by offering you 3 cups of wine." And so he took the cup and emptied it in one mouthful. 2 more cups were filled, and Chu Chang Chun drank again. After the audience with the empress, Chu Chang Chun returned to the monastery and immediately jumped into the first tub of cold water. When the water became hot, he got out and jumped to the next tub. When Chu Chang Chun got into the 24th tub, he found that the water came up only to his chest. The disciples had not filled the tub to the brim. Because he was only half submerged in cold water, the poison that remained in the upper part of his body could not be neutralized. It rose to the top of his head and burned off some of his hair, leaving a bald spot on the top of his head. When the empress heard that Chu Chang Chun had not died from drinking the poisoned wine, she summoned Zen Master Pai Yun and said to him, "Now I have no doubts that Chu Chang Chun is an immortal. He did not die from drinking my poisoned wine." Pai Yun replied, "Your Majesty, it might be that the poison was not strong enough. I have a better plan to determine whether Chu Chang Chun is a fraud or not. It is said that Taoist immortals can change the shape of metals, especially gold and silver. They can make a lump of gold square they can make a lump of gold square or round or flat. We can present Chu Chang Chun with a bar of gold and ask him to wear it around his head. If he can flatten the piece of gold into a headband, then he is an immortal. If not, he will feel so embarrassed that he will go into hiding and never return to the capital city." Again, the Empress invited Chu Changchun to the palace. When Chu Changchun appeared before the Empress, she saw that he had a large bald spot at the center of his head. When asked what had happened to his hair, Chu Changchun calmly replied, "Last night the Empress presented me with the wine of immortality. It was so strong that the gates of heaven on the top of my head was opened, enabling my spirit to ascend to the palace of the Immortals." The Wow, and this reminds us, it was so strong the gate of heaven opened at the top of my head. When Ishwarji, our master Ishwarji, talked about Baba Sawan Singh and how he said that there were 18 chakras, not just the six of the pinda of the physical, but six of anda and the other six of brahmanda, and that these chakras actually were on in the head, starting from the sixth chakra of the pinda, the 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 Tishratil, the third eye of our physical body, and then not sure exactly how it goes, but our dear brother Prempolji told me that Lekraj Puriji, Ishwar's father, wrote on uh, this subject of the 18 chakras, but how Ishwarji actually said that there those centers that were connected to the other um, planes of consciousness were somewhere in the head, like on top of the Tizratil, and behind apparently. And so this is a correlation here that we are seeing, that here it says the gate of heaven opened on top of my head. Of course, here Chu Changchun is just saying this to make the empress not feel that he so embarrassed by that she had given him the poison. So anyway, um, so she had promised Zen Master Paiyun to test Chu Changchun one more time. So even though Chu Changchun showed her that, well, she was somehow aware of what she had done, and he had had a bald spot due to the poison she had given him, that she was still having to test him because she had already agreed with Zen Master Paiyun. So she said, "Taoist Master, you are indeed an immortal. Receive a gold headband from me, and when you wear it, people will know that you are the spiritual teacher of the emperor and empress." And an attendant brought Chu Changchun a gold bar. And Chu Changchun took the gold bar and gently blew at it. When the fires of his internal energy fanned the gold, the bar became as soft as mud. Chu Changchun took the softened gold, fashioned it into a headband, and tied it around his head. The empress was both shocked and ashamed. She stood up and said apologetically, "Master, it was my fault that I doubted your credibility. I hope you will forgive my ignorance and folly." "Your Majesty, the fault is not yours. There are obstacles that I need to surmount before I can complete my training." And Master Pai Yun heard these words, and he came into the room, bowed to Chu Changchun, and said, "Master, the fault is all mine. The monsters of illusion have captured my thoughts. It was I who directed the empress to test you." And Chu Changchun said, "It was I who started this course of events. Master, you have reached the stage of total emptiness. How can the monsters enter your mind?" And Pai Yun thought to himself, I have tried to harm him, yet he does not harbor any grudge. And aloud he said, let the past be the past. Winning or losing no longer matters. And again, we see here how a realized person, he is free from the five enemies, the five children. He is free of anger. He is free of any ill will towards anyone, and so he is displaying this here. And how Ishwar Puriji used to tell us that how the masters, they love they love us even if we hate them, even if we kill them. So these qualities of unconditional love, they gradually manifest in ourselves more and more as we grow in our own path. And Master Chu Chang Chun is displaying this here. Oh, and after his reconciliation with Zen Master Paiyun, Chu Chang Chun, he left the daily administrative matters of White Cloud Monastery to his senior disciples and withdrew into solitude in preparation for his departure from the mortal realm. And he wrote a drawing on his experiences of the obstacles he encountered during his training. He wrote a book called The Journey to the West. And he described how emotions and desires uh, that the seeker of the Tao would have to overcome. He likened the monsters of the mind to wild horses. He warned of laziness and greed. And he described uncultivated intelligence as a mischievous monkey. And after the book was completed, Chu Chang Chun sought out his friend Paiyun and presented it to him. And inspired by Chu Chang Chun's work, Paiyun also wrote a book documenting the experiences and visions that occur on the path to enlightenment. The book was titled The Legends of the Gods. Together, these two books offer guidance to those who seek enlightenment. It is said that Chu Chang Chun attained enlightenment shortly afterward and ascended to the palace of heaven. He was received by many immortals and heavenly lords. When he arrived before the Jade Emperor, Immortal Lu, and the lords of heaven, earth, and water, he saw the other 6 disciples of Wang Chungyang. They had all attained the Tao and were waiting for the Empress of Heaven and the Jade Emperor to confer upon them the status of immortality. And so the lords of heaven, earth, and water unfolded a scroll and read aloud the accomplishments of each of the 7 disciples. Chu Chang Chun was first on the list. He was commended for his unshakable faith and endurance in his training and pursuit of the Tao. Second on the list was Liu Changsheng. He was commended for his intuitive understanding of the mysterious ways of the Tao. Third was Tang Changchen, who was commended for his stability in attitude and behavior. Fourth on the list was Ma Tang Yang. He was commended for his quiet and calm disposition and his simple and straightforward approach to the Tao. Fifth on the list was Hao Tai Ku. Throughout his training, his attitude was untainted by material and personal interests. Sixth was Wang Yu Yang, who was commended for his steadfastness in maintaining stillness in the midst of confusion and conflict. After the 6 names were mentioned, the lords of heaven, earth, and water continued. Sant Puri was the first to embrace the Tao. In accomplishment, she far surpasses the rest of the group, who was initiated into the Tao. So, as she led the initiation into the Tao, she will complete the attainment of the Tao. She will be placed 7th, for the last place is reserved for the one who achieves the highest enlightenment. After the accomplishments of the 7 Taoist masters were read before an audience of heavenly lords and immortals, the Jade Emperor motivated the 7 to step before him to receive the status of immortality. And they all stepped forward and knelt before the Jade Emperor. But only Chiu Chang Chun stood quietly on the side. Seeing Chiu Chang Chun's refusal to acknowledge the gift of the Jade Emperor, the Lord of Heaven said in a commanding voice, "Chiu Chang Chun, why are you disrespectful to the Emperor's gifts?" And Chiu Chang Chun wanted that some of the obstacles and hardships that he had encountered on his path, that the seekers would not have to experience such harsh conditions. And after hearing this, all the heavenly lords and the emperor and then the empress, the Jade Emperor and Empress, they felt compassion for all the mortals, and they conferred a special gift that they would not have to go through so much hardships, and however efforts they made, they would be rewarded many times over, and things would become easier for them just because of Chu Chang Chun's request that they will not have to suffer as much as him. And only after this did Chu Chang Chun accept the conferral of the status of immortality. After their audience with the Jade Emperor, the 7 Taoist masters were led to other chambers of the Palace of Heaven and introduced them to various gods and immortals residing in the heavenly realm. Then came the day when the immortal peach ripened, and all the gods and immortals were invited by the Empress of Heaven to share in the tasting of the peach. As the guests stood before the canopy of the Empress addressed them. "Only those who have completed their cultivation of the Tao can taste the peach. One bite of the peach will extend your life 1,000 years. Many mortals learn well from the examples of the 7 Taoist masters, so that they may also one day taste the peach of immortality." The end. Thank you so much. And thank you, Master. Thank you. I bow my head on your holy feet, Master Ishwar Puriji, for allowing me to do this seva of the 7 Taoist Masters. And may all of us, all of your initiates, may all of us become just like the 7 Taoist Masters, and may we reach immortality, and may we be united with you forever. And Baba Sawan Singh and all of the enlightened masters, may we all reach this, and we all have different troubles and obstacles, and we all have different backgrounds, and we all have a different time as well. And just like the 7 Taoist masters, each one of them had to pass through different things.